Think about it, friends. What if a moment of anger changes the course of your entire life? Science says, an angry decision is not made by thought, but by emotions. And this is why such decisions are often wrong. Aristotle said, anybody can be angry, but getting angry at the right time, for the right reason, and in the right amount, that's the real art. But let's be honest. Do most of us know this art? Today's story is not about an ordinary person. This is the story of such a king. He had the power, and the whole empire, but he was still losing because he couldn't control one thing, his emotions. And when a king loses to his anger, so it's not just him who loses, the whole kingdom loses. Aryavardhana was the king of a vast kingdom. The hearts of the enemies trembled at the mere mention of his name. His kingdom was prosperous, the army was powerful, and the people regarded him as a wise ruler. Aryavardhana was sharp-witted. He understood strategy, knew the tricks of war, and was quick to make decisions. But he had a weakness. He reacted very quickly. He spoke before he could think. He used to punish before he understood. And he used to take such decisions in anger, those who regretted it later. People in the court were reluctant to speak the truth out of fear, because the king's anger was faster than the sword. One day a farmer was brought to the court. He was accused of not doing it. The farmer was trembling. His voice was broken with fear. He said, "Your Majesty, there was a drought this year. The crop was destroyed. My children had nothing to eat." But the king did not listen. He only heard that the order had been violated. "The law is the same for everyone," he said angrily. "Put him in jail." There was silence in the court. A few months later, the king learned that the wife and child of the same peasant died of hunger. That night, the king could not sleep for the first time. But he made up his mind. A king has to be tough. Time passed. The king's anger grew. One day, his most trusted commander disagreed with a strategy. That's all that stung the king's ego. In a fit of rage, he removed the commander from office. A few months later, the war took place. Without that commander, the army was weakened. The state suffered heavy losses. Then, for the first time, the king heard the question within him. At this time, an old monk came to the kingdom. There was peace in his eyes and deep understanding on his face. The king summoned him to the court, and the king asked, "Who are you?" The king was irritated, but the monk smiled. He said, "Your Majesty, you can conquer the world, but not yourself." This sentence went down in the king's heart. The monk said to the king, "Don't make any decisions for a day. Just look, listen, feel." The king reluctantly agreed. That day the king saw that people lie out of fear. Soldiers make mistakes under pressure. The minister hides the truth. And the reason for this was none other than the king's anger. That night the king cried. For the first time, he admitted his weakness. The monk said, "Restraint is not a blessing, it is practice." He taught the king, taking 10 breaths in anger, staying one night before the decision, asking himself the question, "Am I calm?" The king failed several times, but he didn't give up. Slowly, the king began to change. He listened. I understood. I started thinking. Instead of fear, respect came to the court. The public saw that the king now judges, not just punishes. The kingdom began to flourish. One day, the king's own son committed a big crime. The whole court was watching. Everyone knew what was going to happen. The king's anger emerged. But this time he stopped. He sighed, eyes closed, and then judged. Neither too hard nor too soft. On the same day, the king won. This is not just a story about the king. It's the story of all of us. We speak in anger, make decisions in emotion, and regret it later. Remember, a person who controls his emotions can change the course of his life. Emotions are not the enemy, but if we become their slaves, they break us. Restraint doesn't make us weak. Restraint makes us invincible. King Aryavardhana had fought many battles outside, but the war that had just begun was the most difficult, against his own will. Anger doesn't come all of a sudden. It builds up slowly, from arrogance, from fear, from a sense of humiliation. The king was beginning to understand this. When someone interrupted him, a voice would rise within him, "I am the king!" But now, he would not immediately accept that voice. He pauses, listen, and ask himself, is it my power or my anger? One day, two ministers quarreled with each other in the court. One accused the other of treason. If he had been an old king, he would have punished him immediately. This time the king said, "I will decide tomorrow." But he couldn't sleep that night. The mind would say again and again, "If I delay, people will think I am weak." That was the biggest fear, the fear of looking weak. The next day, the king hastily punished the errant minister. A few days later, the truth came out. The innocent were punished. The king broke down. He went to the monk and said, "I have lost again." The monk said in a calm voice, "No, Maharaj, you have learned." The king was startled. The sage said, "The one who falls and rises becomes strong." Learning abstinence is not a straight line. The monk asked, "Your Majesty, why do you get angry?" The monk smiled. "No, because you're afraid." "Fear?" the king wondered. "Yes," said the monk, "afraid that if people do not listen to you, you will lose your importance." The king fell silent. It was true. Anger is often a shield of fear. The monk advised, one day not as a king, but as a human being. The king disguised himself and went out for a walk in the kingdom. He saw the farmer toils, the soldier serves in spite of fear, the mother bears everything for her child. The king felt the burden of others for the first time. On the return, a soldier accidentally pushed the king. If he had been an old king, his head would have been cut off. But this time the king saw that the soldier was tired. I was scared. The king only said, "Take care." Tears welled up in the soldier's eyes. Something changed within the king. The king created a new habit, silence. Every day he sat quietly for some time. No order, no judgment, just breath. Gradually my mind began to clear. He understood peace is more important than words. One day the king's brother stole money from the state treasury. The whole court was stunned. Everyone was watching. Would the king get carried away by emotions this time too? The king's heart trembled. It was a brother. It was a relationship. But he breathed. He said, "The law is the same for everyone, but justice is incomplete without mercy." The brother was punished, but also an opportunity for reform. The king won. Now the people were not afraid of the king. They believed in him. They laughed in front of the child. The elders used to bless him. The king understood. Fear leads to power. Restraint leads to respect. One day the monk started leaving. The king said, "You have changed me." The sage said, "No, Maharaj, you have changed yourself." Then he said, "Whenever you get angry, remember, this moment will pass. But your decision can change your life. Time spends no one." King Aryavardhana was no longer as young as before. Her hair had turned white, but her eyes still had the same depth. Now he spoke less than before. But when he spoke, people listened. The state was stable. The borders were secure. The people were satisfied. But life's greatest trials often come when we think all is well. An envoy from a neighboring state arrived. He was arrogant. The king was deliberately using harsh words to demean him. There was silence in the court. If the old Aryavardhana were here, he would have declared war. But now the king was silent for a few moments. He felt a wave of anger rise within him. My heart started beating fast, but he didn't respond. He said in a calm voice, "We heard your message. Now you can go." The court was shocked. Later, the ministers asked, "Your Majesty, have you endured the insult?" I avoided war. After some time, the same neighboring state was caught in internal strife. He needed help. He sought help from Aryavardhana. The king had every opportunity to take revenge, but he sent help. History has written that empire grew not by war, but by restraint. The king called his son. He said, "If you want to learn to rule, first learn to rule yourself." The son asked, "What's the hardest part?" "Father," said the king, confessing and acting on your anger. The king gave his last speech in front of the public. He said, "I won the kingdom with the sword, but peacefully got respect. If I could take time back, the same thing would change. I would learn to calm down earlier." Many eyes in the court were moist. One morning the king closed his eyes. There was peace on his face. No fear. No regrets. He had conquered himself. This is not just a story about a king. It's yours. It's mine. It belongs to all of us. All of us. Sometimes in anger, sometimes in emotion, and then regretting it. But even today, every human being has a choice. The next time you get angry, wait. Breathe. Remember, this moment will pass. But your decision will become your identity. The strength is not in raising the voice. The strength lies in keeping yourself calm. A person who becomes the master of his emotions is not a slave to circumstances.